name of the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, one God, amen. Peace and grace, everyone. Tonight, we're going to talk about Joshua. For those who don't know Joshua, he was a prominent figure in the beginnings of Israel. All right, he was the one who became the judge, the leader, after Moses had passed away. And we're going to talk today a little bit about Joshua. And before we talk about some of the importance of Joshua's mission here on earth, we're going to get to know him a little. Joshua, who's also known as Joshua, son of Nun, his father's name was Nun, and he was from the tribe of Ephraim. His name means Yahweh is salvation, which means God of Israel is the ultimate source of deliverance and rescue from sin and its consequences. He was first mentioned in the Bible in Exodus 17:9. And if you read from there on, there's little mentions of him in different stories or events that happened while Moses was leading the people through the wilderness when they left Egypt. Joshua in Exodus 17 had victory over the Amalekites. He spied out the land in Numbers 13 to 14 for Moses and the Israelite nation when they were going to invade one of the areas. He helped with the conquest of Canaan. He was a military leader. He was a servant. That's what Joshua was. He was a servant during Moses' time. He was like you can say a disciple, right? He sat by the tent of meeting. He was never looking for any recognition. As a matter of fact, he probably got attacked and insulted by people. I mean, the Bible doesn't specifically say that, but if you read on the one of his accomplishments, which we'll talk about later, he went out with 12 people to a city, and 10 of those people, the spies that went out to that city to see if it's an easy take, were against doing that. They were fearful. They didn't believe that God could help them overcome their enemies. And Joshua was one of the two. The other person was Caleb, but Joshua was one of the two who actually stood out and spoke out and said, "You don't fear them. We have God. God will help us overtake them." And we'll talk about that incident later. But that's what Joshua was. We don't know much about his childhood, but from who he was and what he did throughout his story, you can tell about his upbringing and as a child, and a lot of his childhood. So, like I was saying, he was serving with Moses. He sat at the tent of meeting. One of the things he did with Moses, he went up to Mount Sinai halfway when God was giving laws to the people and Moses. So he was noted a lot in the book from Exodus on to until his book, until he became the leader of Israel after Moses had passed, after they spent 40 years wandering in the wilderness. He guarded the tent of meeting. That was one of his duties. And one of the most famous things he's known for, and we're going to talk about that, is he renews the covenant between God and the people. That's in Joshua 24. So, in the Old Testament, for those who were here in probably the last few months, I give some talks about in the books of Kings and Judges and Chronicles. One thing when the people wanted to come back to God, or there was some kind of major event, you'd have the leader of Israel. The leader of Israel will come out and renew that covenant with between God and the people, and that's what Joshua did before he passes. and that's in Joshua 24. Um, he also was the person who allocated the plots of land and the areas to the 12 tribes of Israel. Before he left, he sat with the leaders of the tribes and told them, this is yours, that's yours, that's yours. So all that land was allocated, the land that God had promised Israel when they left Egypt. He also kept the tribes united. There was conflicts and tensions between the tribes, and actually one of the examples was in Joshua 22, and it was tensions between those living in east of the Jordan and west of the Jordan. So he was a very I guess not well known person, other than that we know who he is. He wrote a book and his accomplishments in that book. Okay, and his accomplishments are what we're gonna focus on today, and actually we're gonna focus on 3 points today, and I'm gonna go through them real fast in regards to Joshua. But the important thing here is Joshua is literally symbolic to some of us, right, or all of us, right? We serve in church. We're the person who is, could be, the quiet person in the group that does what Joshua does. It could be the person that cleans the church. It could be anything, right? You could be anything in the church. You could be Joshua. That's what Joshua was. He was a plain person. He wasn't someone that was, given all this power to, or like Moses, for instance. Moses was a powerful person, right? He was powerful in Egypt, and he was powerful in the tribe of in the nation of Israel. Okay, he was a powerful. Joshua was not that. He was a servant, like all of us here. He was just a plain old servant, and he became the leader because of who he was. And we're going to talk about who he was. I'm going to ask, does anybody have their Bibles out? Can you pull out Joshua 1 and read verses 1 through 9, please? Does the mic, can you give him the mic? Thank you.
You said 1 through 9?
Yeah.
After the death of Moses, the Lord spoke to Joshua the son of Nun, the assistant of Moses, saying, Moses, my servant, is dead. Now therefore arise and all this people and cross over Jordan into the land I will give them. Every place on which you will tread with your feet, I will give to you. As I said to Moses, your territories shall be the desert and Lebanon as far as the great river, the Euphrates River, and from the setting of the sun to the farthest sea. No man shall be able to oppose you all the days of your life. And as I was with Moses, thus I will also be with you. I will not forsake you nor disregard you. Be strong and courageous, for you will divide this land which I swore to your fathers to give them. Be strong, therefore, and courageous to guard yourself, and to do as Moses my servant commanded you. Then you will not turn away from them to the right nor to the left. In this way you will have understanding in whatever you do. The book of this law shall not depart from your mouth, and you shall meditate in it day and night, that you may have the understanding to do all the things written therein. Then you will both prosper, make your ways prosperous, and have understanding. Behold, I have commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be cowardly or fearful, for the Lord your God is with you in all things wherever you go.
Thank you. Joshua's what? He's being called. It's a divine calling, right? He was appointed and even empowered by God. Okay, that's what happened here. God is empowering him. He's calling him. Today, we're in modern times, we get callings sometimes. We get called to a service. We get called to do something. Like for instance, our priests or the deacons. Okay, that's a calling, right? That's what Joshua got. He got a calling. He got it from God. Yeah, he got it directly from God. We get it. God uses others and around us to give us that message or that calling. But Joshua got a divine calling, right? He was empowered by God. He led through many impossible situations. There was two major events in Joshua's lifetime, in Joshua's book and lifetime, that occurred. They were basically two different tests for Israel. Can anybody tell me what they were? Walls coming down. Jericho. Okay? And the second one was him crossing the Jordan while it was in flood stage. So he led Israel through impossible situations. Okay? He was a bold leader. He was a bold leader. And I want to actually talk about the Jordan, right? What was this Jordan symbolizing? What was God showing the people of Israel when he had them cross through the Jordan and the water split? It was in flood stage, by the way. When the Jordan was flooding back then, there was no way you drown crossing through. It was a river, it was a rapid river. What was God doing when he told Joshua to lead the people through, have the Ark of the Covenant go in first, and the priests stand there with the Ark of the Covenant and the people pass through? What was he trying to prove? Or what was he trying to teach the Israelites? Faith. But there's something else. See, Moses had passed away. Moses had brought Israel, the parents of those who were alive during Joshua's time, through the Red Sea. They considered him their leader because of that. He got them out of Egypt, and the Red Sea parted. The same thing God did with the Jordan. Joshua, he had to show the Israelites that Joshua is their leader. They are to follow him because he's going to tell Joshua what to do to save the Israelite nation. Right? So that's one of the major points of that crossing the Jordan. It was symbolic to crossing the Red Sea, to parting that sea and crossing it. The invasion of Jericho. Jericho was one of those cities that was impossible to invade. Okay? Back then, they did not have the weapons and the armaments that the Romans had, or possibly the Persians. Okay? Back then, they didn't have that. They didn't have things that can just knock down a wall with ease. No. Jericho was considered an impenetrable city, had massive walls all around it. Imagine you're the leader, right? You see an impossible thing in front of you, and you don't know what to do, right? Well, he knew what to do. The one thing he did was rely on God. And he follows God's direction, which we will talk about later. But that's what makes him a bold leader. He took the Israelite nation towards a city he knew was impenetrable, took them there, and that's what I would call a bold leader. Someone who would do something like that, knowing that that city is impenetrable. No one has ever been able to take it down. In one of the battles, in Joshua 10, chapters 12 to 14, he even was bold enough to have the sun and moon, to command the sun and moon to stand still during a battle. Something miraculous, amazing and miraculous. Very few people in the Old Testament you hear that can control Mother Nature around them. Very few people in the Old Testament. I mean, I can name a couple, like Elijah, but something miraculous. And he was bold enough and actually commanded during the battle that the sun and moon stop where they are while that battle rages on. Question for us, yes. Can you ask the... Yeah. Sorry.
What was the significance in him stopping it?
Pull out Joshua 10 to 12. Chapter 10, 12 to 14. And please read it.
Did I not deliver you from the Egyptians and from the Amorites and from the sons of Ammon and from the Philistines, from the sons of Sidonians and Amalekites and Maonites, who oppressed you when you cried out to me, and I delivered you from their hand? Yet you have forsaken me and served other gods. Therefore I will deliver you no more. Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen for yourself. Let them deliver you in this time of your distress. And the sons of Israel said to the Lord, we have sinned. Do to us whatever is good in your eyes. Only deliver us this day.
Did you, is that chapter 10? Is that Joshua chapter 10?
I'm sorry, I'm in Judges.
Thank you.
I was like, what does this even have to do with
Sorry. I was trying not to interrupt, but
It was 12, right?
yeah. Let's read from verses 10 to 14, please.
The Lord rooted them from the face of the sons of Israel, and the Lord crushed them with a great destruction at Gibeon. They pursued them on the road heading to Beth Horon and slew them as far as Azekah and Makkedah. But as they fled from the face of the sons of Israel on the descent of Beth Horon, the Lord cast down hailstones on them from heaven as far as Azekah. More died from the hailstones than the sons of Israel killed with the sword in the battle. Then Joshua spoke to the Lord on the day God delivered the Amorites into the hands of Israel, when he crushed them in Gibeon. They were crushed before the face of the sons of Israel, for Joshua said, let the sun stand still over Gibeon and the moon over the valley of Ajalon. So the sun and moon stood still until God brought vengeance against their enemies. The sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not set in the west until the end of the day.
Yeah. So right there, that's the answer. So when he did that, he wanted more sunlight for Israel because the battle was raging on. That was the purpose of him stopping the sun, for more daylight for the Israelites. So that, I hope that answers your question. But the fact that he did it shows how bold of a leader he is. He did this in front of the Israelites, by the way. Imagine you're standing there. God may have empowered you, right? But let's say he empowers you to go outside right now and says, call out and say, you know, the rain come down in a crowd, right? Do you expect it to come down? I mean, a lot of people will doubt, right? Well, that's how it was with Israel. Because if you read through the beginning, from Exodus, when they left Egypt, till this point even, all they did was groan and say, oh, weren't the gods of Egypt, taking care of us, or the kings of Egypt, or whatever? They would be groaning against God continuously. Okay, so for him to do that in front of them, for him to do any of this, to take them to Jericho, I'm sure there's a lot of people there that doubted they would be able to take Jericho. I'm sure there's a lot of people that were probably laughing when he started walking, having the priests walk the ark, into the Jordan, and it divides. So that takes it takes a bold leader. The question is, how seriously do we take leadership when we are called to it? In modern times, this is why I said Joshua is us. He's like us. We're Joshua. Okay, here now. Okay, sometimes we're called to lead. We're called to lead different things. I mean, I remember the first time I was ever asked to lead anything, right? I was scared. Okay, I'll be honest. I had a lot of fear. I wasn't like Joshua, where he was not fearful. No, I had a lot of fear that I would do things the wrong way, do this, because it was my first time. And you know what? I didn't do the one important thing, and that's ask God for his will to be done in that service I was asked to lead. And that's why I'm saying we are Joshua. We're called. We're people in church. We're people outside in society. We want to serve. We have that zeal in us. We're called to it. But how seriously do we take it? Yes, Uncle Samir.
Say that doesn't happen. I just want to say that didn't happen all of a sudden in the life of Joshua.
No,
Because
no.
you mentioned earlier that he was a disciple of
Yes.
Moses from the book of Exodus. So it took him some time as a disciple before God has called him for this big
Yes.
mission for the Israelites. So this idea of being a disciple is very important before you expect to lead, or God would call you for a specific kind of service. I mean, we cannot ignore his life as a disciple of Moses before he was called for this mission.
Thank you. So yeah, that he probably had a lot of learning he had to do when he was younger, and it gave him that. Just like I was saying, I got called into something to lead something, and it took me some time to learn, to rely on God, to ask God to do His will. That's what at least happened in my own experience. Okay, do we take initiatives? Okay, when we're empowered, are we bold enough to do any of this? If we were in that position, are we bold enough to take those initiatives? That's a question we need to ask ourselves when we are called to do anything. Priests, when they're called, at least in the Coptic church, I was raised in the Coptic church, so I don't know how it is in the other. I know that a lot of Orthodox churches, you go to seminary, you can become a priest, or not theology school and get a theology degree. It will lead you down a path to become a priest. In the Coptic church, it's a mix, right? Sometimes there's someone who doesn't have a theology degree. They're picked because they're servants in church. They're people that want to serve others, and people in the church are comfortable with them. But taking on priesthood, it's very serious. All right. It requires a bold person to take it on. You're called to lead a congregation. You're called to lead what is called a parish, or a service even. There are priests that have services like missionaries and things like that. You're called for it. As a matter of fact, when a priest goes up and is getting ordained, the pope or the bishop will tell him, hey, one of the commandments in the commandments they're giving, they're actually telling them their responsibilities as well, and they're telling them the blood of these people is on your hands. They're literally telling them that. So that in itself is hard. But do we take it when we're called to take it? That's the question. Do we take that step? And when I was younger, I know a lot of people that turned it down because they know the responsibility behind it. They know. Some of them are my friends. They're married. They have careers. One of them actually told me I turned it down for the very thing that the bishop would tell you, that the blood of everyone is on your hands. He was worried about his salvation, his family's salvation. That's how serious it was. So that's the question. How bold are we to take a calling? It doesn't mean that because he was called, that it was God's will. Maybe it wasn't God's will for him to take it. But it's about taking that step when it is God's will. When there's an insistence on it, when everyone around you, like God's sending you that message through everyone around you. Okay, are we going to take that step? Are we going to be bold enough? He was bold enough to not take that step and continue serving in church. So you have to pray about it. You have to realize where God's leading you, and you have to take that step if that's truly your calling. And God will reveal that to you, just like He did with Joshua. He will reveal it to you. You'll have a revelation of some kind as to what God is calling you. So that's what makes Joshua a bold bold leader. Sorry, his faith. Okay, his faith was unwavering. All right. We know a lot of people in the Bible. We know a lot of a lot of the characters, the people who we've learned about, we've talked about. People like Joseph, people like Noah. All right. People like Elijah. Right. Their faith was unwavering. Now, for Joshua, he's in the wilderness. Right. His wilderness is literally a wilderness. It's out in the deserts. They were roaming. They're going into Canaan. Okay. So it's a wilderness. And his faith was very strong to the point he didn't have a doubt in his mind that God's going to get him through whatever trial is in front of him. So in Numbers, I think earlier I told you about him coming back with a report with 11 other people. He was one of the 12 that were sent out to spy in the land. So in Numbers chapter 13, verse 25 to chapter 14, verse 9, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but when he was one of the 12 spies, Caleb and him stood against the report, declaring, "Only do not rebel against the Lord, nor fear the people of the land." Okay, he's saying this, and the other 10 are saying, "No, we can't go in. We can't take these people. They're too powerful for us." They're giving a horrible report, right? You come in, right? When you come in the morning, right, to work, let's say, and your boss asks you for a report on all the work you've been doing. What is the first thing we're going to do? Give a positive report or give a negative report? What do we want to give? We want to be positive, right? We want to bring the positive side. I always walk in, right, when I got news for someone, and if it's good and bad news, I'll be like, "Listen, I got a lot of great news. I just have, some little bad news, but we can work around it," right? And I'll give them the good news first and tell them how we can work around the negative stuff, right? But you had 10 people come in and give a horrible report to Moses, and Joshua and Caleb stood against the rest of them, against the group, okay, and spoke out and said, Don't fear those people, okay? And don't rebel against God. Because if you fear those people, God's telling you go and take the land, right? You're rebelling against God when you're fearing others. You have no reason to fear anything or anyone when you have God standing beside you. Imagine wandering around a desert for 40 years. 40 years of wandering. Joshua was a child when they started wandering around the desert. Imagine wandering around the desert for 40 years. How would your faith be? What do we expect today? If someone was wandering because the leader that God assigned was leading them to a desert for 40 years rather than take them into the promised land, how would our faith be? It would probably waver, right? Our faith would probably, I would say right now, if I look at society today in modern times, most of us, our faith would waver. Some of us will even go into despair, unfortunately. And that's what's happening in society today, because this is our wilderness. Okay, this city, this society we live in, that's our wilderness now. That's where we are. So it's like people that think that they can't find their purpose in life. They're lost, they're confused. And then they end up, taking medicine for mental issues or whatever it is. Okay? But that's what's happening today. They can't find their purpose. They're missing something in life. They're missing something in life. Well, these people, the Israelites, wandered the desert for 40 years. 40 years out in the desert. And all they did was groan and moan against God and say, "Oh, you're not feeding us. We're thirsty," and all this. And all they did was complain. And Joshua was in the midst of them. And his faith still did not waver. He became a leader and did the things we talked about earlier. All right, his faith did not waver. He didn't even seek recognition for anything he did, including sitting at the tent of meeting. You know how, unfortunately I'm going to say this, but some people will do something great and they'll brag about it, right? Sitting at the tent of meeting is a big deal, right? You're right outside where the ark is. Okay, important people sit there. It's a fact, right? Important people sit there. People who are trusted, people who talk to the leadership, they're sitting there. And he never, there's nothing in the Bible that shows that he even wanted recognition for that. He didn't ask for recognition for anything. He never once gave himself glory. He gave it to God. If you read the book of Joshua, all he did was glorify God, praise God, and do exactly what God was sending him to do. He was faithful, he was obedient, and he was disciplined. And the questions I have for us, and I asked this already, what's our wilderness? It's a society we're in. And does our wilderness cause our faith to waver? That's an important question. Sometimes we go through trials. Sometimes bad things happen to us. I know. I experienced it in my life. I've had a little trauma when I was a child. And it caused my faith to waver because I was weak back then. I didn't know what I know today. But what happens to everyone else? What happens to us outside of this building? What happens when, something that's life-changing happens to you that was actually negative, that hurt your life? Whether, you got sued, you went financially bankrupt, whatever it is, or you failed something in school that's going to impact you in the future, or you didn't get into a university or a college you wanted to, or get the job you wanted to. Something that could have been or is life-changing, but maybe you think it's something bad for you. What happens then? Something bad that happened to you, rather than maybe God has a different path for you. But what happens to our faith when that happens to us? As humans, sometimes our faith wavers. Sometimes we even ask God, why? Right? Why? Why are you doing this? Sometimes we moan and groan like the Israelites did with God. These are questions that are important. These are what we can learn from Joshua. He was allowed into the promised land even though he roamed with Israel. He was the next generation that God allowed in because Joshua was not a person who was complaining about God or to God. He was a person that did exactly what God wanted him to do from him when he was young. And he became that strong leader for that. His faith is what gave him that strength. You want strength? Build your faith. Make it as strong as possible. Don't ever let it waver. Just like Joshua did not. And another important thing about faith, I think we were having a conversation earlier, some of us, but are we seeking recognition? Or are we doing it to serve God? Whatever we're doing in life, are we seeking recognition from others? That's a question we need to ask ourselves. Society needs to ask itself that. And the final point I have about Joshua, and I think all of you might have read it, stepping into promises before they unfold, right? The first thing Joshua does, can you pull out, does anybody else have the Bible? Anybody else want to read? Can you read? Where's the mic? Oh. Joshua chapter 1, verse 10 to 11.
Then Joshua commanded the officers of the people, saying, "Pass through the camp and command the people, saying, Prepare provisions for yourselves, for within 3 days you will cross over this Jordan to go in to possess the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess."
Guys, before that, we read before that. We read Joshua chapter 1, verses 1 through 9. Now we just read verses 10 and 11. They don't know what to expect across that river. What expectation should they have? They don't know what they're about to go into. Joshua's leading all these people. He's responsible for what? Uncle Samir, what was it, 1.5 million people back then? The Israelites? Yeah, he was responsible for all those lives. He's taking them across a river and he doesn't know what's on the other side. He's doing what God told him. He's stepping into a promise before he even gets a sign. Do you remember back in the book of Kings when we talked about Hezekiah, for instance, or some of the other kings back then? Whenever a prophet would go to them and tell them this is going to happen, they would ask the prophet for a sign to prove that that's going to happen, as if what's going to happen wasn't miracle enough. He didn't ask for that. He took all the lives he's responsible for, his own family, and walked across the river and he did not know what was going to be on the other side. And that to me is a huge amount of faith. That to me is a huge amount of strength. One of the cities he takes on the other side, and we just talked about that earlier, Jericho. All I can tell you is Jericho was already claimed by God before it was even knocked out. Okay? Jericho, I was telling you earlier, is an impenetrable city. Impenetrable city. Okay? This city, all it's got to do is seal its walls, and there are others, by the way, and you can actually go to Europe and see some of the big, massive castles that have massive walls around. Some, they're probably all falling apart, but these were places that can withstand attacks. That's how Jericho was. So God tells Joshua to do something different, okay? To not go and attack. Like, don't just go run in and attack, right? He tells Joshua, you're going to march around the city for 7 days. The first 6 days, you're going to march once around the city with the Ark of the Covenant, the priests that are blowing the ram horns, and your armed men, once around the city every day for 6 days. And then on the 7th, you're going to march around 7 times, doing the same thing, blowing the trumpets and armed men and the ark. And on the 7th time, the people will shout and the walls will fall. If someone came and told you to do that, right? You have whatever weapons you have on you, swords and whatever, right? You got walls in front of you. If someone told you to do that today, you'd probably say they're crazy, right? You can't just go in and invade a country. I mean, we see countries right now trying to invade other countries. It's not that simple, right? That's how Jericho was. Jericho was leveled. Okay, Joshua does exactly that. And what's the lesson from this? What was God putting into the people when he did this? What's the lesson from Jericho? Jericho had a huge lesson behind it. Obedience and discipline. Obedience and discipline. You see, when I spoke before, I told you that the Bible is not some book where you're reading stories. It is our journey with God. It is literally our journey. Every writer who wrote books in the Bible, when they were inspired by the Holy Spirit, they wrote the details that we need for our salvation. They didn't write everything. We don't know conversations, specific conversations between people. Maybe some of us might be interested in it, but it didn't matter to our salvation. This was a lesson. This was a lesson of obedience. It doesn't make sense. Today, it doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense in society. You can't walk around the country or a city and think its walls are going to go down, right? That's how we think. It doesn't make sense. It didn't make sense back then. So that's the lesson that God gave the people of Israel. These were all lessons throughout their journey. Their journey into the promised land. Those 40 years were not just about punishing them. No. It was 40 years to discipline them and their children. Their children must learn. They must learn about God. They must know who God is before they go into that land. That's what the 40 years were. And then they walk into the land and they learn more lessons there. In Joshua 23:14, can someone pull that out for me? You okay? All right. Who has the mic? All right, go ahead. 23:14, please.
Soon I will die, going the way of everything on earth. Deep in your hearts, you know that every promise of the Lord your God has. Sorry, this is... All right. Somebody else have it? I can read from them.
23:14, please. Verse 23:14.
Oh, you have it?
Behold this day.
Okay, thank you. Behold this day, I am going the way of all the earth. And you know in all your hearts and in all your souls that not one thing has failed of all the good things which the Lord your God spoke concerning you. All have
Yes,
come.
that's
That's
fine.
it?
Right there, yeah.
Okay.
He knows that God will always fulfill promises. God told them, keep my covenant, keep my law, be the holy nation. All right, he consecrated that nation as a holy nation. Consecration, holiness, that's being set apart for God. Okay? All they had to do was follow his covenant. It's like living in the governments we live in, right? There are rules, there are laws, there's sometimes moral, some forms of morality. There's things in the places we live in. It was the same thing for them. If they didn't like it, they could have just left. You could just leave. So all they had to do was follow, listen to his covenants, follow what the agreement between him and the people. The people, all they had to do was follow that agreement between them and God. All right, and he fulfilled every promise when they did that. And every time a king would go back to God after one of his ancestors betrays God or forgets about God, and they would go back, God would save them and renew that covenant, and God would protect them and fulfill whatever promises that were there that he promised them. He promised them peace. He promised them a land filled with milk and honey. All right, that's what he promised them. All they had to do was follow the covenant that they had between them and God. The question here is, do we always hold on to the promise of salvation? See, we all have one goal in life. It's not to become a doctor. It's not to become a pharmacist. We're here for one thing. It's salvation. We were promised salvation. And are we holding on to that? See, all this was salvation for Israel. It was salvation for God's people. Do we trust that God will get us through our trials? This is our wilderness. This is it. And we have a lot of trials out there. We walk out of here, we don't know what's going to happen. There are many times I've had one experience, and it was pretty hard. Someone close to me, probably my best friend when I was growing up, I was sleeping over at their house, and they passed away, and I found them in the morning. For me, that was a trial. And I had very few people to go to, but I knew that I can go to God to get me through that specific trial. It was a hard thing, especially when you're young, you're in your teen years, okay? And it was several years before I got to a point where I can, continue moving on to being a better person and focusing on my salvation. But it was hard. It was really hard. That was a trial, I personally went through. That's the question we need to ask ourselves. Will God get us through trials? Look, in life, we go through things, even things that are beyond us, things that we cannot handle by ourselves. Okay, has anybody ever heard the phrase that God will never throw anything on you that you can't handle? It's false. He's not throwing it at you, and you will go through trials you can't handle alone. And God, if God wills it, it'll happen, and you will overcome them with God's help. That's something I learned myself. There are many trials that are overwhelming for us as human beings. We're weak, we're frail, okay? We're weak-minded, okay? We're weak-minded. You can literally, one thing I was good at when I was in my 20s, I can sell you something you don't even want or even thought of having. Okay? That's how weak-minded people were. I was going up to them, selling them things they didn't even need. We're weak-minded. Finally, one verse I want to end with. There's a famous verse from Joshua. Does anybody know what it says? Yeah, can you give her the mic, please? It's chapter 24, verse 15. It's on decorations. There's Christian decorations. You can even buy it on Amazon. They literally have plaques. I actually, it was in my shower. The shower curtain in my house for like 2 months or something, or a month. It had that verse all over it. It was pretty cool. Go ahead.
For me and my house, we will serve the Lord, something like that.
Yes. Can you read it? Chapter 24, verse 15.
And if it seems evil to you to serve the Lord, choose for yourselves this day whom you will serve, whether the gods which your fathers served, that were on the other side of the river, or the gods of the Amorites in whose land you dwell. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord.
But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. When we started this conversation, I told you we are Joshua, okay? We are that person. We learn. We become strong in our faith. It's about determination if we want it. If we want it, we can get to that point where he says that to the Israelites. He tells them, you can do whatever you want. I know where I'm going. Those are his exact words. Anybody have any questions? Yes. Can you give him the mic, please? Thank you.
So, what do we do when we're like going through a tribulation and we're like angry at God? Like we know and we can trust God because of like our past experiences that he will get us through it, but we're still angry at him.
Oh, there's a lot of things you can do. I can tell you one thing that probably you wouldn't like, be like read the book of Job. All right? You probably wouldn't like that answer, right? You want clear answers. So, look, there's no real answer to that, okay? Sometimes we fall. Questioning God, asking, why is this happening to me? That's wavering. That's your faith wavering in God, right? And we fall for it, all of us. Everyone has probably fell for at least once, okay? When we get back, when we start focusing and we get back, we got the one thing we need to go back to is that conversation where I'm asking God why, or I'm complaining to God. I need to learn from it. Okay, I need to learn that next time I go through something, ask God for help rather than complain. Ask him for help. That's a lesson we need to learn. That's part of growing up. Okay? No one became a servant out of the blue. No one. All right? People are called into service. You know, the fathers, you know what they do in a lot of the churches in the area? I don't know if they do it in Queens too, Uncle Samir, but they have a pre-servants 2-year program. Okay, they train youth in high school. Okay? And even after they graduate the pre-servants and they become servants, they put them in services where people that are a little bit older or maybe even a lot older can teach them. Because no one will become strong out of the blue. It's the same thing with your faith and your how strong your faith is. You're not going to be strong faithfully or spiritually just out of the blue. It takes time, it takes effort. Put effort into it. So when you face a trial like that and you do, and you start complaining or asking God why or whatever it is, first of all, I will say if you have people around you that can help, people that you can talk to, especially some of the church fathers, okay, go talk to them. Sit with them. You don't even look for advice. Just find someone to talk to. Sometimes you just need that. And then when you are over that trial, when that trial in your life is over, think back on what happened only one time. Just think about it once. Don't dwell on it too much. Just think about it and learn from it. Next time, trust in God. Trust in God. Pray for his help. Pray for his assistance. And you got to train yourself. It's not going to happen the second time. It's not going to happen the third time. It might take a few trials for you to learn that you need to ask God for his will. His will and his help. All right. Any other questions? Can you give him the mic?
So I know we didn't discuss this during the talk, but during the when the Bible would describe a lot of the conquests done by Joshua and by the Israelites as a whole against groups like the Canaanites, for example, it often uses language that a lot of people kind of are a bit alarmed by. So it uses, I think, hyperbolic language. And so is that the right Orthodox approach.
Can you give me an example?
So in Joshua 1:12, I know Joshua 11:21, devote them to destruction. A lot of the polemics against Christianity would be, they would be telling us that, your Bible is not moral because it has all of this language against, these groups of people. But from my point of view, or from, I think the honest reading of the text would be that a lot of this language would be hyperbolic, because the Canaanites would often appear in the next chapter, right? So God would give like a command, and as long as it's within sort of this, the Old Testament law and how we treat other people and how the Israelites were supposed to conduct like warfare. Is that like the Orthodox understanding of the text, or okay?
It's funny that you picked that verse. All right, devote them to destruction. What do you think was meant by just those 4 words? Do you think he was talking about the people or the evil in the land?
Could possibly be the evil. I'm looking.
Well, he is talking about people if you read the entire section, right? He's talking about the people in that land. But it wasn't, God was not out to destroy his own creation. His mandate was to destroy evil. Because God is all holy. Okay? And you're a holy nation is coming into the land. Destroy all the evil. So, let me ask you a question. What was the first disaster recorded in the Bible and probably in all of humanity's history? The first disaster that took out most of humanity. What was it?
It was probably Noah's flood.
Noah's flood.
Right.
And then what did God do after that?
He regenerated the land.
Yeah, but what did he do? He promised there wouldn't be another flood. What's the next event that took out a lot of evil? Now, Noah's flood, it was for what? It was to take out the evil. And we talked about that when I spoke about Noah. It was to take out all the evil in the land. Okay? There was evil all over the land, and I even talked about some of the controversial people or controversial things during those times. Now, what is Israel doing? There's no more flood. God's not going to flood the earth again. He said he will never do that again. What was Israel supposed to do? The same exact thing. Remove evil from the land. Because what? They're holy. That's telling us to remove evil from inside of our hearts. Our job is not to go out and kill anybody. That's not even their job. They weren't out there killing people in cold blood. This was strictly good versus evil. That's what it was. And that's the view on it. If people focus on the actual events of who they killed and what they did, then they're missing the whole point. Last time when we talked about Noah, we talked about how corrupt earth became. And even we talked about one of the controversial books. They're not in the Bible for whatever reason, not in all the churches' Bible, the book of Enoch. It talks about some of that stuff, how evil that land became during Noah. Okay? Now, I'm not here to say it's 100% true or 100% false, not my problem. But you take what is in there and you compare it to what's in Genesis in the flood, and you see how much corruption was in the land. Well, that's how Canaan was. It was very corrupt. It was very sinful. Just like Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah, Abraham asked who appeared to Abraham? It says the Son of Man. Abraham asked him, what if there's 50? And he goes all the way down to 10. They couldn't find 10 people, righteous people in Sodom and Gomorrah. All right, the angels that came down to destroy the city couldn't find 10 righteous people. All they found was Lot and his family, 5 of them. It was 5 or 4, Uncle Samir? Him, his wife, and his 2 daughters? 4, right? Okay, yeah, 4. So 4 people. They couldn't find 10 righteous people in 2 major cities back then. The fight was never person against person. It was good versus evil. It was evil versus holiness. That's what it was. Okay, because God is holy.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, like, God chose Israel as the holy nation, but it's also interesting that he wasn't willing to spare them punishment when they did things that were wrong.
No, he was not.
So, like, when they disbelieved, or when they touched the Ark of the Covenant, or when they worshipped calves, stuff like that, they were also not,
When you tell God, "Hey, step aside. I don't need you right now." When calamity comes at you, you got no protection. And that's what Israel did to themselves. There's consequences to sin. There's consequences. Even today, there's consequences. The church, and I'm talking about actually all the Orthodox churches. You commit a crime, like murder, right? And you get arrested and go to jail, the church tells you to don't run away. You do exactly, you get exactly what you bargained for. You sinned, and that's what you got. And you have to pay that penalty because there's a consequence to this sin. Yes, even if you're getting absolved. So there's stories you'll hear where priests will give absolution, but they'll tell you, like, okay, there was an Orthodox person who committed murder during a fight. Okay, he didn't like pull out a knife or kill the person. They were fighting and his head hit the floor and he died. And he ran away before anybody saw it. He went to the priest and confessed, and this is based on a true story, by the way. Goes to the priest and confesses. Priest was like, "I'll read you your absolution. But whether God absolves your sin or not, that's on the next action you take." And he went and handed himself in. He told the police exactly what happened. So even the church tells you there are consequences to sin. Okay? Christ said himself, "Give God what is God's and give Caesar what is Caesar's." And he wasn't talking just about money. He was not talking just about money. You live in a country, you have to follow what the country's saying, even if you don't like it, unless it is against God's doctrine. Okay, that's a different story. But there are laws. And you know what? What's funny is most of the laws in this country are based somehow on biblical law. Okay? Things like blackmail and murder and these things are in the Bible. All the laws you hear outside. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. David has a question back there.
I was just going to say that a lot of these other nations were following basically demons in the form of other gods.
Yes.
And so, as Mina's saying, it was God's way of ridding the world of evil. There were times where they were given chances to either repent or to have their God challenged. And at the same time, often God's commandments were actually very specific and lenient and merciful. So, for example, I was listening to something recently where they could not, if they were to take wives from those people, if they were willing to come with them and be wives, for example, they gave them a long period of mourning. They treated them as an equal. All these things that were actually completely foreign to the people around them. So actually, God was even in this action of ridding the world of these evil kind of cults, let's say, or other tribes. He was still at the same time teaching them control and respect and love, but at the level of the society at the time. Before we have
Before we evolved mentally.
Yeah, before we were ready to have kind of the relationship with Christ where we can see true love, you know. But so many times he would say, you leave their belongings, do not bring anything with you, don't loot the village, don't do this, don't do that.
Burn it. That's what his words were.
Yeah.
It's devoted to God.
So
This was-
in all these instances, if you actually are reading it in the context of the times, he's actually teaching them kind of a discipline and using them in a way that he's teaching them a lot about how to treat other people, even if they are not like them. Even though it seems brutal by our current standards, at that time it was considered being extremely merciful to leave these people, to not take people as, you know, the wives as sex slaves, to actually take them. If you're going to take a woman from this clan, they are your wife. You know, they didn't say other, you know what I mean? Whereas if those people had come and taken the Israelites, they would be treating them far differently. So it's still a way in that they're evolving their morality to, he's still evolving their morality in a way.
Yeah, sure. Read about what?
Just about what he just said. Like
The entire Old Testament.
the entire Old Testament is about.
So
just
let
like
me-
the treatment of them.
No. Yeah. You're talking about the actual book. Yeah, Orthodox
Yeah.
Study Bible. But
I have one.
so let me go back a little. In the books before the book of Joshua, right? There were laws spelled out. I believe it's 614 laws, right? And basically what David's saying here, right? Those countries or those peoples that Israel was asked to destroy violated probably all those laws in some way or another. Now those laws, like I was saying, most of the countries in this world follow most of those laws. Okay, and what are they? Don't murder. Okay, don't extortion, stealing. All right, things that define morality in a society. These people were doing it to themselves, and they would have probably done it to the Israelites. Actually, when Moses was coming through the land, one of the nations, I believe it's the Amorites, one of the nations attacked Israel from behind. Even though Israel said they're just crossing through in peace. They're crossing the desert by that country in peace, and they told them. And that country came and attacked them from behind. That's in, I got to find the book. I'll get you the reference. But that's how the people were back then. Okay, they would have done worse to Israel. It would be worse than just being destroyed for the evil that you're in. So there's a lot more mercy in that than what those people were doing. I mean, look what happened in Sodom and Gomorrah. They wanted to take the angels, and I'm sorry to be this blunt, but they wanted to rape them. They thought they were just regular men, and they wanted to rape them. The men in the cities. Okay, that's how the treatment was in those places. Humanity gets to a level of corruption, and I'm sad to say it. We see it a little bit in society today. It's getting to a level of corruption where it's just becomes very immoral. But but Orthodox Study Bible, and if you look, you don't have to read the laws or the books of the laws. Those are the first 5 books. It might. Genesis, definitely. The other books, they're the journey of Israel out of Egypt, and some of the, like for instance, in Deuteronomy, Leviticus, these are the rights and the rules and the laws, and there were some events in there, Numbers as well. So if you want to look at that, and then you can look, if you really want to learn about these people, the books that will really help you in the Bible, not a lot of people read them, Judges, Kings. Okay, they talk about the people of Israel, how they fell from God and came back, and they talk about the nations around them. That the Israelites left rather than remove as God had commanded them to do, and how they became a snare to Israel. Any other questions, guys? Sorry, we went every word today. All right. And glory be to God forever. Amen. I'm going to read up the announcements for you real fast. So we just have a couple of announcements. There's a trip to Egypt, December 20th to January 3rd. The information's on the screen. If you would like to sign up, you can go to travels.smsm.nyc. I believe they're closing this very soon. So they're closing it soon from what I heard, but if you want to sign up, now's the time to do that. Save the date, New York City SMSM Conference, November 7th to the 9th. And it's called Beacon of Faith. This is, David, is this their second or third? Third annual conference. If you're a college or a grad student, university and or medical resident, please register online, campus.smsm.nyc, to get updates on campus ministries. We do have some campus ministries out of the St. Mary and St. Mark. Actually, Holy Week, as an example, we had a few services on a couple of the campuses during the day. Please follow us on our social media. Our handle is SMSMNYC on all the apps. You'll also find links for everything pertaining to this church and parish at links.smsm.nyc. And if you want to donate, we have multiple options. We have Easy Tithe, Zelle, and Venmo. Venmo is SMSM and NYC. Zelle is hello at stmarystmarkmanhattan.com. And for Easy Tithe, you can scan the QR code. And that's all. If we can stand up for prayer, please.
Finally, O Lord, hear us when we say thankfully, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our trespasses. Lead us not to temptation, but deliver us from the evil one. Through Christ Jesus our Lord, for thy is the kingdom, the power, the glory.